What is up, Pit Boss Nation, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Platinum Grilling. I am your host, Chef Shaun O'Neale, and today we are tackling beef ribs. We've got some beautiful beef back ribs and some gigantic short ribs. We're gonna smoke these up on the Pit Boss Platinum Series Lockhart and see the results. That's all coming up right now. Welcome back to Platinum Grilling. I could not be more excited for today's episode. Today we are taking on some beef ribs, some classic beef back style ribs, and some gigantic short ribs that I am just in love with. Today we're gonna do a little bit of a comparison on the both. We're cooking on the Pit Boss Platinum Series Lockhart, available exclusively at Walmart. On this side is the back rib. So this whole cut will run you about $35. Then over here we have our short ribs. As you can see, just meaty and massive. So this whole thing is about $35, which equals to about one of these. So if you're looking for not necessarily a budget cut, but a little bit cheaper and value for your money, you might want to go with the back ribs. If you're looking to splurge, these are absolutely delicious. So let's get into this. As with pork ribs and all ribs, there's a membrane on the bottom of these guys, right? So first thing first is we need to get that membrane off of here. So what we're gonna do is take a knife and just slide right under this membrane and just start lifting up, right? And then once you get a little bit of a section here, you're gonna wanna grab a paper towel, and then you can literally just pull this membrane right off. See? All off in one piece. There we go. And this is with all ribs. I mean, whether it's pork, whether it's beef, whether it's short ribs, whether it's back ribs, lamb ribs, you always want to take that membrane off. And what happens when you bite in, you leave that membrane, and that's what kind of drags away. All right, so there are our back ribs. Even these short ribs have that membrane on the bottom right here. I've already removed it from that one. You can see how it's kind of been pulled away. We'll get in right here with our knife. And this one's got a little butcher's cut there, so I'm gonna start on this end. Okay, so now that we've got our membrane removed from both of our ribs, it's time to season these guys up, get them on the grill. So we've got our Pit Boss Platinum Series Lockhart set to 225 degrees. Right now I've got the heat shield open, but I'm gonna go ahead and close that when I put the ribs on. I just wanted to heat it up a little bit faster. So I'm gonna throw some gloves on here. So we're just gonna take a little bit of mustard here, and we're gonna spread this right onto our ribs a little bit. Too much. We wanna give this a light coating, and what this really accomplishes, it's really the same thing as what you would do for a pork rib. It's gonna help the seasoning stick to this and provide a little bit of a moisture and a barrier, just so it doesn't get overly smoky. So we're gonna rub this on pretty good on both sides, and we're gonna do this with both the back ribs and the short ribs. We're doing these exactly the same way today. We wanna see what the outcome is, how long they take, what's the differences, and really kind of give you an idea of the next time you want to do beef ribs, what ribs are best suited for you. All right, so we're gonna do the same thing with our short ribs here. Get this mustard nicely coated so that seasoning will stick to it really well. All right, so our ribs are coated up in our mustard. Now it's time to season them. Let me get rid of these gloves. Today I am using the Pit Boss Original Beef and Brisket, and we're gonna mix this with a little bit of brown sugar. I like to bring in a little more sweetness, and it'll also help caramelize and give a little bit of that beautiful crust that we love so much by adding a little bit of sugar. So I'm just gonna take the lid off this guy. We don't need the sprinkle. We're gonna go ahead and pour. So we're gonna pour in about an equal amount of the original beef and brisket seasoning as we have brown sugar, and this will be our salt component. So we've got our salt and our sweet, which really makes barbecue what it is, right? Salt, sweet, and smoke. That's what makes it beautiful. So we're just gonna mix this with hand by hand and get it nice and stirred up. Make sure you don't have any brown sugar clumps in there. So the salt's already in there, the pepper's already in there from the seasoning, and then our sweetness is coming from the brown sugar. So we're gonna season these guys up. We'll sprinkle them pretty liberally. You really want that seasoning to soak in. Once that fat starts rendering, it sucks in that seasoning into the meat of the ribs. So you want it to have a good coating on it, so when that fat starts melting, it just pulls all the flavor right in. Okay, so this side is seasoned. So we'll season the underside, not quite as heavily as we did the top. The back is gonna obviously take more seasoning because it's bigger. So this guy's good. Let's kind of set this aside, and we'll get onto our short ribs. So season all sides of these short ribs. And the higher you season from, the more evenly it will disperse. Turn these guys over. Oh my goodness, they are gigantic. Make sure again we've got that nice coating, because when that fat melts, it's gonna pull all that seasoning right into the beef. All right, so these guys are just about seasoned up. So again, we've got our grill set to 225 degrees. Let me just make sure I've got all the nooks and crannies on here. I mean, we're gonna use pretty much every last drop of this seasoning here. Get the underside. Since we removed that membrane, we really need to season the underside too, because that seasoning is gonna be sucked into the meat. So there we go, we have used every last drop. It was about a half a cup of brown sugar to probably about a half a cup of our seasoning blend. All right, so it's time to get these guys on the grill. We are gonna use the bottom section of the smoker, the actual grill section. These are right on the edge of me actually putting them into the upper smoking chamber. I don't like to do anything in the upper smoking chamber that takes too long. And we've discussed this in the brisket episode, just because you're burning so many pellets, right? And these are right on the edge. These are gonna take about 6 hours, right? And I only do stuff in the upper smoking chamber if it's gonna be 5 hours or less. So you could do them up there, but you're gonna burn through a lot of pellets because instead of having your grill set to 225, you're gonna have to have it set to 325 to attain a temperature of 225 in the upper smoking chamber. So I like to do these on the bottom because they do take about 6 hours. So they're all seasoned up. We're gonna close our heat shield right now. We've had it open to help heat up the grill a little bit faster. So we're gonna close that right now. Open, closed. So we're gonna go ahead and get our ribs on the grill. We use our Pit Boss tongs. I want the fat end, the big wide end, towards the back. All right, and then now we'll get our short ribs on. I'm gonna lay these guys long in the grill, and we're gonna move them because the heat source is right here, right? So about halfway through, we'll rotate them, and then we'll also flip that guy over. So we will put our ribs in. All right, so our ribs are on the grill. Now let's take this party inside into the kitchen and let's make our Boss barbecue sauce. Okay, so our beef back ribs and our short ribs are on at 225. About halfway through, I'm gonna put a thermometer in there and start temping them. We're looking to cook those to 195, 200 degrees. But I like to get my barbecue sauce started as soon as I put the ribs on. The longer a barbecue sauce has to sit and let those flavors meld together after it's cooked up, the better it's gonna be. So you can make this the day before, you can make this a week before. When it's finished, it will sit in the fridge for about a month, to be honest with you. We're gonna strain the onions and the garlic out. So it will sit for about a month. This is made with things that you should have on hand, and we're also going to use the same rub that we used on the beef ribs, the original beef and brisket rub from Pit Boss. One of my favorite barbecue sauces. We're going to get this started. First thing we got to do is add about 2 tablespoons of olive oil to our pan on the stove, and then we're going to cook these onions. All right, so we've got some oil in the pan. Let's add our onions, and we are going to cook these guys down until they are pretty well caramelized. So this is going to take about 15 minutes. If you need to add a little bit of water, if the pan starts to get a little bit dry, add a tablespoon or 2 of water just to keep it moist. We're looking for a deep golden amber color here. We're going to season it with a little bit of salt. And we're also going to season it with our beef and brisket rub, right? To start those layers of flavor, to start building flavor at the beginning here. So we're going to season the onions, and then we'll add a little bit more of this once we've got the whole sauce put together. So we're going to let these caramelize. These are going to cook for about 15-20 minutes over about medium-high heat. You want to stir it pretty often. You don't want anything to stick, and you don't want anything to burn. We're not looking to burn these. We really want a very nice caramelization, and that's going to transfer flavor into our sauce. So about 15-20 minutes, stirring pretty often. All right, so our onions are very nicely caramelized now. We're gonna add about 4 cloves of minced or crushed garlic. You just want it pretty fine. And then we're gonna let that cook for about a minute, just until it's fragrant. I think some of the best things in the world food-wise start with garlic and onions. I mean, the smell just fills the house. It's the chef's starter pack, I guess, if you will, to, that smells good. It's just onions and garlic, but it works. You know, it's one of those staples that just is your base layer of flavor. So I can smell it now. We just really needed to toast the garlic to really get it nice and fragrant, soften it a little bit so you're not getting that raw garlic taste. So here's what I do a little bit differently with my barbecue sauces. I'm gonna turn the heat down into about medium low, and I'm gonna add my sugar to let it melt before I add anything else. That way it distributes a little bit more evenly through the barbecue sauce. If you're making a roux for a jambalaya or for a cheese sauce or something like that, you're gonna add your flour and your butter. I wanna put in my sugar and let it melt a little bit before I add my other ingredients. And I find that it just it gives you for a better flavor of a sauce. So we're just gonna let the sugar break down just a tad bit. And once we see it starting to melt a little bit, then we'll start adding our other ingredients. All right, that looks pretty good. So it's on its way to caramel, if you will. So at this point, we're going to add our 2 cups of ketchup, just regular old ketchup. This is really your base. So 2 cups of ketchup, and we'll also add 2 cups of apple cider vinegar. Give this a nice stir. Try not to splash it all over the place. All right, so you want to make sure you get in and scrape those corners, because some of that sugar, when we pour in the liquid, might have tightened up a little bit. It will melt again, but you want to just make sure you get it out of the corners, just so it doesn't burn as you're cooking this down. So we'll give this a good stir, make sure everything is incorporated. And what I like to do is I like to cook the vinegar for about 5 to 10 minutes, let everything kind of come together. We'll season it with a little bit of salt, not too heavily, because you want to do that at the end if you still need more salt at the very end. You want to kind of let all the flavors come together. Salt it as needed. So we'll give this a stir, let it come to a simmer, and then we'll start adding the remainder of our ingredients. Okay, so far our ketchup vinegar mixture right now is what we'll call it, has been simmering, boiling, low boil for about 10 minutes, so we can go ahead and start adding our remaining ingredients. So first things first, we will add a 1/2 cup of honey, a little bit more sweetness. We didn't use a whole lot of brown sugar. I mean, a cup is a lot, but I've seen barbecue sauce recipes call for a whole lot more. So we're gonna add a little bit of honey to increase the sweetness. We've got a 1/2 cup of Dijon mustard. This brings in a little bit of acidity, a little bit of spiciness, natural spiciness. We've got 1/2 cup of molasses. A little bit of sweetness, but molasses really provides the smokiness. It's kind of that classic barbecue sauce flavor that you know instantly that you're eating a barbecue sauce. That's what molasses provides. Here's that chipotle, about a 1/4 cup of chipotle puree, a 1/4 cup of Worcestershire sauce, and a 1/4 cup of your favorite hot sauce. Really any smooth hot sauce will work great for you. We're also gonna add some red chili flake. We're gonna do that after we strain the sauce, right? So we're gonna strain out the onions and the garlic just so we don't have any chunks. I like this barbecue sauce to be pretty smooth. So stir it around, turn the heat down to absolute low, and just let it lightly simmer for about 45 minutes to an hour. Then we're gonna strain it, put it back on with a little bit of crushed red pepper, season with salt and pepper, season with a little bit more of our Pit Boss original beef and brisket rub, and then we can let it cool down and throw it in the fridge. But for right now, let's make sure we've got it all nice and cohesive and incorporated. Well, our barbecue sauce has been simmering over low heat for about 45 minutes now. We're gonna strain this to get rid of the caramelized onions and the garlic. They have done their part, they have imparted their flavor, and we don't want a chunky barbecue sauce. So we're just gonna strain this through a wire mesh strainer into a bowl, and we're gonna put it back into the pot here. So try to get as much of it out as you possibly can. Get as much of the onion out. You could give it a little rinse if you want to. We'll get as much of this liquid, push this through. All right, obviously you see we're making way more than we need for just tonight's ribs, but it lasts for about a month in the fridge if you can it. I mean, you could get a year out of it. So right now I'm just making sure I get all of the liquid, all that great barbecue sauce, press down on those onions a little bit to make sure that you get all of that barbecue sauce coming through the sieve. That looks pretty good. I'll give it a little scrape here. Transfer this to the sink. Okay, so we're just gonna add this straight back to our pan. And along with it this time, we're gonna add about a 1/2 teaspoon of crushed red pepper, and we're gonna add about a teaspoon of our original beef and brisket rub from Pit Boss. All right, that looks pretty good. All right, we're gonna let this come back to a simmer. We're gonna simmer it for 15 more minutes, give it a nice stir, make sure those seasonings are nicely incorporated. 15 minutes, we're gonna let it cool down, then we'll put it in the fridge until we're ready to eat it. All right, our barbecue sauce has been simmering for about another 10-15 minutes after we strained it. It is silky, smooth, and delicious. I can't wait to get this on the ribs. We're gonna let it come to room temperature. We're gonna let it cool down completely, put it in an airtight container into the fridge. Again, it will last for about a month. Or canned, maybe even up to a year. So we're gonna let this cool down and we'll go check on the ribs here shortly. All right guys, so I was inside keeping an eye on our Smoke IT app and I noticed a couple things. First off, our beef back ribs are done before our short ribs. I kind of expected that, less meat density on there. So we're gonna pull those off and I'm gonna wrap those up, put a little bit of sauce on them, a little bit of seasoning on them. I also noticed that our short ribs have stalled. So stalling means that they get to a certain temperature and they have a problem getting a little bit higher. So we're gonna crutch those and we're gonna put a little bit of sauce and a little bit of seasoning on those guys. So let's get our beef back ribs off now. Oh yeah, those look amazing. All right, so our beef back ribs are at 200. We're gonna hit them with a little bit of barbecue sauce and some of our seasoning from Pit Boss, our original beef and brisket. Then we'll flip these guys over and do the same thing on the other side. All right, so now we're gonna wrap these up. We're gonna throw them in the upper smoking chamber to keep them warm until our short ribs finish up. So we wanna compare them at the same time. So it's a little windy out here in Vegas today. Tuck any excess paper underneath. And then we're gonna crutch our short ribs and I'll show you what we're gonna do. Basically the same thing we just did. All right, so these short ribs look incredible. We could probably let them go in without crutching them, but I like how juicy crutching the ribs really keeps them. And it also imparts a little bit more flavor. So we're gonna pull our temperature probes out. They're both at around 170 degrees and they've been there for about 30 to 45 minutes, so they're not moving much. So we're gonna pull our temperature probes out and we're gonna crutch them up, hit them with a little more sauce and a little bit of seasoning. All right, they look amazing. So we'll drizzle some sauce over top of them. Hit it all around with some more of our seasoning blend here. Okay, and then we're just gonna wrap these guys up and throw them back on the actual grill section, putting the probe back in to make sure we keep an eye on the temperature. All right, the probe is quite hot now, but we'll insert it. Try to get it into the fattest part if you possibly can. All right, so we've got our short ribs crushed and back on. We're gonna cook those to an internal temperature of 200 degrees. We'll be back. So I've just thrown our back ribs in the upper smoking cabinet. I should mention that the upper smoking cabinet's temperature is at about 190 degrees right now, which is perfect to really hold those back ribs until the short ribs can finish up. All right guys, our beef ribs are done cooking. Our beef back ribs were cooked for about 4.5 hours at 225. Then we wrapped them, sauced them. The upper smoking cabinet temperature was about 190 degrees. So these are cooked beautifully through. Our beef short ribs cooked to a temperature of 203 internally. We wrapped them when they were about 170 degrees, sauced them, seasoned them, put them back on the grill with our thermometer right back in there, and we cooked them to 203. They are beautiful, soft, juicy, delicious. So now, again, it's the waiting part. We have to rest these for 20 to 30 minutes. Then we'll sauce them up, throw them on the grill to get a nice little sear on them. Time to chow down. Well, that long rest, it's always the longest part of the cook, is finally over. So I'm gonna glove up here and we're gonna unwrap our beef ribs. We're gonna start with our beef back ribs here. Oh yeah. So we'll transfer these right onto our tray. We're gonna throw them back on the grill to get a nice sear and cook in that barbecue sauce. I don't like barbecue sauce just drizzled on top. I want it cooked in. You don't have to use the barbecue sauce if you don't want to. I know sauce or dried barbecue, that's kind of one of the big debates in the barbecue world, but you know, I'm showing you the way I like to do it. All right, let's unwrap these short ribs. I can feel how just tender and juicy they are. Look how juicy that is and just tender. It's just falling apart. Okay, so we're gonna very carefully sear these guys off. We've turned our grill up to 400 degrees. We're just gonna throw them in just to get a nice little bit of crispiness on there, and then we're ready to dive in. Oh, can't wait. All right, let's sear these guys off. All right, we'll give those guys a quick sear. We're gonna brush on a little more barbecue sauce. That will cook in the sauce a little bit, but also give us those nice crispy little bits around the edges that are gonna make this delicious. All right, so they are finally completely done. We're gonna let them cool down just a little bit. They were over direct flame. So let them cool down just about 5 minutes, and then it's time to dive in and get a little dirty. All right, so I'm gonna get into these beef back ribs first. I wanna give these guys a nice shot. Ooh, they look juicy, they look delicious. Yeah, they're nice and juicy. There you go, oh yeah. We went for about 4.5 hours, and we wrapped them, threw them up top, sauced them, seared them, sauced them. That's so good. It's smoky, it's sweet. You get the vinegar from the barbecue sauce. Really good for the money. This whole slab was only like 30 bucks. Now, one of these individually was also $30, but these are insane. I mean, they are dinosaur ribs. It's smoky. It's so good. I mean, it's unctuous. The fat has really rendered down, and there's a lot of fat in short ribs. I mean, this is why this is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, smoked meats. I mean, look at that jiggle on that guy. You can even taste the pellets, that competition, Pit Boss competition blend pellets. You can even taste each type of wood in there because that fat has really absorbed all those great flavors. You know, if you're doing a comparison, this is shorter cook time, it's cheaper, you can probably feed a couple more, maybe one more person off of it. But if you're gonna spend the time, if you're gonna take a day and actually barbecue and smoke something, the short ribs are the way to go. Both equally delicious, but these short ribs are a showstopper, a crowd pleaser, whatever kind of adjectives you want to put in front of it. These short ribs are amazing. My vote, as you could tell, definitely goes to the short ribs on this one, but you got to give it a shot. You got to get your smoker running. You got to get your Pit Boss Platinum Series Lockhart up and running. Set it to 225. Cook these beautiful beef ribs. You won't be disappointed either road you go. Just get out there and smoke something. So this recipe, as well as many other recipes, are available on pitbossgrills.com. So check me out at Chef Shaun O'Neale on social media, and I'll see you next time on Platinum Grilling.